Hello, health heads. Welcome to this dose of healthcare uprising.
Hi, I'm your host, Heather Pierce. Over the last 20 years, I've worked all over the healthcare industry, from startups to Fortune 500 companies in marketing and communications. Now I'm leveraging my experience and connections in the healthcare realm to bring you this Healthcare Uprising podcast.
And I'm your producer, Jeremy Carr, and I really have no experience with healthcare at all. So I'm your local man on the street, as it were.
And we're here to inform, educate, and create awareness on all the latest innovations in healthcare, as well as the most basic aspects of the healthcare system, like how to use your benefits, what's a PPO versus an HMO, why Medicare matters, things like that.
Yep, that's what healthcare uprising's all about. So why don't you tell them what's on today's agenda, Heather?
So today we are meeting with Anya Askew. She is a local Flagstaff birth doula. She moved here in 2003 to study interior design at NAU, but life had other plans. She ended up spending about 11 years in the health and wellness supplements industry, and later, after giving birth to four beautiful children at home with midwives, she became a certified doula herself in 2021. She's very passionate about women's health and is here to share how she now supports and empowers women as a doula.
Yeah, this is going to be a cool follow up to Latham Thomas in episodes 10 and 11 and
Mhm.
get a little deeper into the specifics of what doulas do and how they operate and stuff. So I'm actually looking forward to this after that last one. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Anya, the doula.
Hi, and welcome to Healthcare Uprising podcast. We have Anya Askew, a local Flagstaff doula. Welcome to the show, Anya.
Hey, Heather, great to be here.
Great. Thanks for coming on. We're excited to continue our conversation around doulas and educating the universe and especially men on what doulas are. This guy right here. So, Anya, why don't you give us just some background, your history, kind of what led you to become a doula, maybe your personal journey that led you here. And we'll definitely want to hear a little bit more about your own personal experiences with doulas as well, with your own children. So,
Yeah. Well, I was blessed and had four really great birth experiences. I had all four of my children at home with midwives. And I did have a doula with my first that ended up becoming my midwife for two of the births after that. And so I had these really great women that supported me and they gave me this amazing experience. And I think, for the rest of my life, that was going to be one of the most empowering things that I've ever done. And so I knew with those experiences that I wanted to pay it forward. And so I've considered being a midwife, but it is it's a big commitment. And so I don't think at this current time that I'm able to do that because I still have kids in school and trying to manage the mom life with the doula life. But definitely one day that is the goal is to be a midwife and again, just paying it forward, passing those experiences along, and making sure that women feel empowered. And I have a best friend that had a wonderful hospital birth experience. She would joke with me all the time. She thought it was just so crazy that I had home births because she showed up to the hospital, got an epidural, slept, had her baby. So it's not necessarily about, one way or the other. It's about the woman being able to choose what birth experience she wants. And a big role as a doula is to try to help facilitate that and however it may look. And so, I think a lot of people have a misconception that a doula is for home births. And that's not the case. I've been to far more hospital births than home births. And so it's making sure that the woman feels nurtured and cared for and that continual care throughout the birth experience. Whereas if you go into the hospital, you've got, shift change for nurses and, the OB is really only there, periodically to check on you, but then at the very end. And so having somebody there that's by your side from start to finish with the birth experiences is really what it's all about. And so how I became a doula was 2021 and COVID was still happening. And I was looking at a lot of different options. I just had my little guy 2 years prior. So he was getting to an age I knew he would be going to preschool. And so I was looking into midwifery and different avenues of what I wanted to do. And so I was trained in April 2021 as a doula. And I've been doing it ever since. Absolutely love it. So
Mm.
So, Anya, you had obviously you had home births. Is that how you were first exposed to what a doula was? Like, did you know what it was? Did you have this idea in your head even before you had kids that you're like, I'm gonna use a doula, and two, maybe I'll become a doula too. Like, what was that like for you to even
No,
come
so
across this whole concept?
well, I was introduced to the concept of a doula when I was working with a midwife in my first pregnancy.
Hmm.
But you have to pay out of pocket to have a home birth. It's not, it's becoming more, insurance is seeing a need for it and covering it, but everything was out of pocket at this time. And so I didn't choose to spend the extra money to hire a doula. But ironically, there was a gal that was training to become a midwife, and she was a doula. And they asked me if it was okay if she came to my birth to get, as part of her certification. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And she ended up being my saving grace and she was such a blessing and became my friend and also became my midwife for the two births after my first one. And so that was really my first experience with a doula. And I had a very, loving husband for the experience. But even he was like a deer in the headlights. And just there was a certain point when it's an intense or can be an intense experience. And, he really just didn't know how to support me and didn't know what to do. And at that point, my doula, she was just everything. We actually kind of arm wrestled to get through like the last little part of it. And so I think that was when I really realized how amazing these women were that were supporting me and got me through, the birthing process and made it, again, such a peaceful and empowering experience. And so from there, it was like I knew that's where I wanted to go. I wasn't sure how I was going to get there. And so, yeah.
Well, that's cool. Um, I should add here too for our listeners, Anya and I are friends, so I know that she had her babies at home and not too far away from me, so that and that you were becoming a doula. So that's exciting stuff. I'm so glad that we can get your perspective on this because you've not only have you had all your children at home and through the support of either a midwife and or a doula, but then you became one. So um, you kind of have a great perspective, I think, for this conversation. So, and truthfully, in hindsight, I wish I had had a doula for
Right.
for my births. Honestly, like I really do. Like, dang it, why didn't I know about this? Like, it really, I don't know, it wasn't as widespread or common. And I know we're going to talk about kind of the increase of doulas too, and I think maybe even midwives as well. Um, but tell us about what kind of day in the life, like in day in many lives of a doula, right? Because I imagine they can be really different depending on what's going on. But can you kind of share some of maybe the nitty gritty details?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with more of the business side of it, where a client who is considering a doula can schedule to have an initial consult. And so we get together, we talk about, when the estimated due date is, does that work for the doula schedule? And then moving forward, we talk about, what a doula looks like and what specifically it might look like in their birth. And our role in that. And then if they choose to hire a doula moving forward, there are usually two prenatal visits, and those are at 30 weeks and 36, 37 weeks. And we are available at any point for any questions, concerns, things that come up. And a lot of pregnancies can really change fast, and so it can go from wanting a home birth to needing to be a hospital to being an induction or a C-section. And so again, having someone that's there through it all, no matter what happens. And so we're there for those questions. And but usually we only meet at the 30-week mark and the 36, 37-week mark. And a doula will go to their house and just, check out where they're at. So we're not trying to find it at 3 a.m, knock on the wrong door. And then for the birth aspect, it can look a million different ways. It's really up to the client. So, early labor can be a very intimate time for a couple, and they can, watch TV, play games, go for a little light walk around their house or their neighborhood. And so, but other clients, they might feel better going ahead and being at the hospital and having support early on. And so it's really up to them. And so we really reiterate that with the client. It's whenever they want us there. And it has looked a million different ways. And so we'll go whenever they say, hey, this is labor, it's really happening. And although we are not medical, and we don't make any decisions for the client as far as medical advice, we have experience enough to know when labor is progressing around a good guesstimate of around what stage of labor they're in, and can say like, hey, your contractions are getting pretty close together. It might be a good time to let's load up in the car and get to the hospital. And the idea behind laboring at home is that there's less interventions. So if a doula is at home, the mom feels very comfortable, can get into a healthy labor pattern before going into the hospital, because it can be very jarring. And I think in our society, we really overestimate what a primal experience this is. And a mom needs to go inward, and really kind of shut off the outside world and just focus on her body and how things are unfolding, and not have to worry about outside stuff. And so, another role of the doula is, hopefully the mom has had birthing classes, but doesn't have to be fully on point in labor. She doesn't have to remember all of those things. We're there to kind of guide her and help her do different movements. And, and also for partners, it can be very intimidating to see someone you love going through something. And I think a lot of men really want to fix, situations, and birth is nothing to be fixed. It's something to just kind of sit back and let it, naturally unfold. And so having a doula is also really reassuring for partners, that they don't have to be the one making the decisions, or is this normal? What are those noises? Those types of things. We're there for reassurance too. And one thing too, we always tell clients is we are not there to replace the partner. So it is very important that the partner is, present and engaged, has some direction. So like I was mentioning with my husband at my first birth, and he just got to a point where he just didn't know what to say or do. And, it was really nice to have a doula step in. And so he was still there. He was still present. He was very encouraging. But also there wasn't that burden on him alone to be the only encouraging factor. There was someone else to say, okay, I'm going to step up. And so, oftentimes too, labor can be a long process. And so dads, they're so focused and in the moment, they're not eating, they're not getting a break, and they need to be able to have the longevity to be there. And for it to be a good experience for the partners too. They really need to make sure that they, this is something they're going to remember for the rest of their lives as well. And so it's a big part of the doula role is taking off, hopefully some of the anxiety and the burdens that, a partner might feel, or a mom, the anxieties a mom might have in the moment. And so when a mom calls and says, hey, I'm in labor, this is it, I'd like for you to come over. A doula can go to the house or go to the hospital and stay throughout the entire process until baby is born. And then there's usually a golden hour, which is 60 to 90 minutes, where the mom and the baby get skin to skin and they really get to bond. If the mom is choosing to breastfeed, she can breastfeed, all of these things, right? And during that time, our role is still to nurture the mom. And so because there's medical folks there to take care of all the rest, but making sure that, okay, this has been exhausting or can be exhausting. So let's get you a really good, nutritious meal. I like to call it the victory meal. Let's make sure that, you're hopefully the mom is hydrated throughout the process, but even more so afterwards if she's gonna, try to breastfeed. And I mean, even if not, it's such a process, just making sure that we're focused on, let's get the mom to a really good place. Let's get her cleaned up. And then usually after that, 1 to 2 hours after baby's born, everybody's pretty tired and ready to take a good nap. And so that's about the time we will, step out and let them have that time as a new family. And from there, we'll do one postpartum. We'll check in. We try to do it within the first week after baby's born and just make sure that everything's going smoothly. If there's more issues, if they need, support, outside support, like postpartum, or if they need a lactation consultant or whatever that might look like. So that's kind of an in general idea of a doula's role. And as far as the birth goes, like time requirements, obviously that is very, very, um, it's all over the
Across the
place.
board. Yeah, you just don't know how things are going to go.
Right.
No. And
I wanted to
so,
ask too, can somebody extend their support like with you like into the postpartum phase?
Yes.
Okay.
So you would call that postpartum doula support, and it's very different than the birth.
Hmm.
But that would be someone coming in, and it can be whatever the mom needs. If the mom needs nutritious meals, pick up some groceries and cook those meals, do some freezer meals, meal prep. If the mom is just needing, a shower or a nap, we can take care of baby. And it can be whenever. So a lot of times moms have support from family or partners, have time off work in the very beginning. And then when they go back to work, that might be an ideal time to get outside help. And so, yeah, but that would be more postpartum doula support versus the birthing doula support, but absolutely. And I think, again, a lot of people underestimate so many of these things. And it's glorified, Hollywood movies and how all this plays out, but it can be really hard to adjust to a new baby. And so having somebody there that's experienced, they know what to expect, and even just to sit there and say, again, this is perfectly normal. What you're experiencing is normal. If you need it, here are the resources available to you. So
I have a front end question on your process. So you only meet with them twice before the actual birth. I feel like there's a lot to go through in those meetings. Can you give us like kind of an example of the things you actually talk about, like the questions you ask them and like the topics you discuss for that?
yeah.
It's yeah.
Um, so we really like to get to know the clients. We do try to do as in depth as possible during those two meetings. And like I said, we can do an initial client consult, but until they hire us, we try not to go too in depth. And then once we do, we're asking questions about, their personality. What do they do when they're in stressful situations? What are their birth expectations and hopes? What are they hoping that their birth plan looks like? And just going over a lot of those as well for the partner, because sometimes partners have ways of coping that will come in handy to be aware of. And so let's say that there's a dad that has high anxiety, and when he feels stressed, he needs physical exercise or activity. And so knowing that and being able to say, hey, this is a really good time to step outside the room, go for a little walk around the hospital, grab something to eat and come back, and just being aware and learning our clients. And so when a doula really learns the clients and their personalities and again, how they cope, and their birth expectations, we can kind of get an idea of how we will support them specifically. And the other thing with the birth plan is there's a lot of things at the hospital that are a given. And so this one's a really common big topic is delayed cord clamping. So with the umbilical cord, hospitals usually clamp and cut pretty quickly, like 60 seconds after birth. And it's a very fast process. And based on evidence-based birth information, there is evidence out there supporting delayed cord clamping. And so even when you say, hey, I want delayed cord clamping after my birth, sometimes for certain providers, that can mean, just a few minutes. And so if you're wanting something like 10 minutes or until it stops pulsating, then you need a birth plan. So you need something written up.
What's the benefit of that, by the way?
Um, I'd have to, I wouldn't feel comfortable quoting it just off the top of my head, but just
Mhm.
that, in general, the evidence-based birth is stating that the baby is getting more of the hemoglobin, that it's better for the baby. The flip side and it's more positive benefits than negative risks, but that jaundice could be a factor. And so that is the controversy in that specific topic. Again, most of the research points towards it being very beneficial. But again, I mean, this is it's a woman's choice. It's her baby, it's her body, it's what she wants, but making sure she has the resources. And we all know that you can look up a million different things and go down a rabbit hole. So making sure finding evidence-based birth information, so it's not just somebody posted it and it's not credible, but making sure they have credible information to make decisions. And so we'll go over the birth plan. And if there's things that a mom is wanting that is not standard at FMC, then, or for the midwife, if it's a home birth, then we will talk about how to word that on the birth plan so that before the birth unfolds, you can pack it in your hospital bag, hand it to the nurse. And so it can be little things like the delayed cord clamping, or I would like movement. I would like to avoid an epidural or, things like that. These are pretty common topics that we talk about. And so we'll go over a lot of those. And when discussing those, we bring no judgment. It's not a doula's birth experience. It's the client's. And so it's really whatever the mom wants. And so we bring no judgment. We don't take anything personally. And so when certain topics come up, we just want to make sure the mom has all the information possible for each individual topic so that when she goes into the birth, she has sort of how she would like it to unfold. And it doesn't always work out. There's plenty of moms that they do everything right and they have this plan and, life just happens. And so even what that might
I
look
had
like,
one of those.
the mom is really not wanting a C-section. I know you can probably attest to this one, right?
Oh, yeah.
But specifically for C-sections, a lot of women are fearful of that. And they think, oh, if I have a cesarean, some women look at it as a failure. Some women are very open to whatever, as long as me and baby are happy, but understanding the client and their relation, in these topics and how they're feeling about them. And so still allowing them to have certain choices, even when it goes a different way than they had hoped. So for example, in a cesarean, if that ended up happening, they do have the option for a clear curtain. So if a mom wants to be able, to see baby being brought out, they can use a clear curtain so the
Oh, you
mom gets.
mean that goes in front of you that normally, well, in my
So there
case, I
has
can,
to be that curtain, right, to make a safe
right.
environment. But the mom can have a clear curtain. And so you do have to request it. They're not going to automatically do this for you. It's something that you have to say, if I have a cesarean, I would like the clear curtain. I would like to see my baby. Please hold my baby up, first thing.
Was
And
that not a thing like when I was having my kids? Because nobody ever offered that to me. So,
exactly. So, I mean, that's the thing, and they won't offer it to you. This isn't something that an OB is going to discuss with you, especially if it's, an emergency type situation and things are progressing and changing very fast. They're not going to say,
mhm.
hey, let's talk about that. They're going to say, it's time, let's move forward. But talking about all of these different possibilities ahead of time is really, again, a big role of a doula. And I don't think, a lot of clients know the in general birth process, but they haven't gone down each specific, topic and different things that could happen in the birth process. And so talking about those ahead of time, feeling where the client is at and what their what their thoughts on it, opinions are on it, if that were to happen, and how we can help still make that an empowering experience.
Yeah, one of the things you had mentioned earlier on, and it was about allowing particularly in a situation, I would say, where somebody does want to give birth at home, but even if somebody who is planning to go to a medical facility, more laboring at home, less intervention in the
Yes.
end. When you
Yes.
talk about intervention, so that is like inducing or Pitocin or moving to C-section quickly. Are there other things, or can you kind of expand on that a little bit about what that means? Like the importance of being able to labor at home as long as possible to avoid intervention, medical intervention, I assume.
Um, Absolutely. So it is very provider specific. Um, and so, specifically in our town with Flagstaff Medical Center, right now there is a huge change going on. We've normally had two different OB providers. We've had Flagstaff OB, and then we've had North Country. And those are your two options as a mom if you're choosing to have a baby at the hospital at FMC. And recently there were two OBs that left Flag OB, and there's only one left that is still doing deliveries. And that has caused so many problems. And a lot
Only
of
one?
clients are getting duet.
There's only one left? Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
So there's only
Okay.
one doctor left at Flag OB at the current moment, and a lot of clients, very, very blindsided,
Mm.
got moved to North Country, and then North Country is overwhelmed. And so, and then with North Country, there are traveling OBs, there's midwives, there's just regular OBs. So there's lots of different options too, and you can choose who you see as your provider throughout your pregnancy. Um, so sorry about that. Am I there? Okay,
Just a
good.
minor glitch. You're fine.
You're good.
So you can choose your provider throughout the pregnancy, but when you go in to give birth, you are at the mercy of whoever is there on call. And so and again, how things unfold can be very provider specific. And so, based on our experiences, there are certain providers that might, like, let's just use for example, there are A, B, and C induction methods. And so, maybe most OBs will go A, then B, then C, but there are other providers that will go straight to C, and for whatever reasons that they have. And so they bring their own personal experiences, their own expertise as well. And so each provider might do things a little differently. And so making sure that the mom is in a really healthy, solid labor pattern before going into the hospital, they're going to avoid even talking about A, B, and C. She's already doing great. She's progressing. Things are going well. Let's just, normally they'll take the stance of like, let's just see what happens. You're doing great. And blood pressure is good. All these things are looking good. Mom and baby are healthy. Then they're going to let things unfold and baby's going to happen, and they're really not going to have very much involvement. They're going to monitor, but they're not going to necessarily direct or anything. They're going to let the mom have that experience. But when things start happening, that's when the interventions are necessary and needed. But early on, I think there is this sort of anxiousness to get things going into that labor pattern. And so, once you're at the hospital, it's like all eyes are on the mom, and, questions are being asked. Whereas if she's still at home and letting them unfold, it's just, so that's the idea behind that, is making sure that she's already in a good labor pattern before she goes in. And then they will take that step back and let things unfold from
So
there.
a doula really can and does decrease the opportunity for C-section. Can we, I mean, is that a pretty fair statement? I mean,
Absolutely.
it-
Yeah, there's
yeah.
plenty of statistics out there, especially the evidence-based birth. I keep referring to that, but that's what,
Mhm.
doulas use to send clients to show, okay, this is like the accurate research that shows that hiring a doula, percentage wise, and I probably should know that number off the top of my head, but that we decrease the risk of those things. Yes.
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember. Latham Thomas from episodes 10 and 11 talked about that. I think she said, I want to say it was 28% reduction in surgical births.
Yeah, it was
I,
a
I
Or
big
was
something
thinking,
like it
number.
was it was a pretty big number.
yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds about accurate. Yeah.
No.
Do you find too, like in your experience, and it sounded like I think you said earlier on that you probably end up working with more clients that actually deliver in a medical facility. So in our case, Flagstaff Medical, we don't have any other birthing facilities here, do we? I think that's the only
No,
one,
so
right?
I can touch on that too. So we have two midwives and they do not work together. They have separate businesses.
Hmm.
One is Jana. She has Aspen Midwifery and the Flagstaff Birth Collective. And then there is Margie with Woman Care. And Woman Care is actually opening up a birthing center in June, late June, I believe. And very, very excited about that because we have not had a birthing center in years.
And it
Right.
sounds like we need it now that there's only one OB at FMC.
I was going to
Exactly.
say, and this again, and this comes up a lot on our show, is that we have some real big issues in rural America. And Flagstaff's not even like as rural can get. But even still, when you're serving all of northern Arizona, it's a regional medical center and you've got only a couple of OBs like just in this town, like that's a huge problem. I mean, at least we still have a hospital that you can deliver at, because that's, another thing that you see in kind of this rural America issue is that you've got hospitals that are just completely shutting down their delivery maternity wards. So,
Mm.
Yeah. So the birthing center is very exciting. And I think, birthing center is a great solution for any
mhm.
woman that is on the fence, where she's like, I like the idea of having a more intimate experience and having a little bit more of a peaceful birth, because even just the basics of a hospital, the fluorescent lights and, constant people in and out of the room and different things, for some women can be, something they're trying to avoid. But yet a home birth is very intimidating because there are things that can happen. And so having that reassurance that, a birthing center is sort of in between those two options, and it feels a little bit more comfortable for some folks. So yeah, super excited about that. And it's
That's
also
great news.
fairly close. I mean, we're talking, it's going to be minutes from the hospital. So,
Oh, wow.
let's say that a mom is laboring and
Hmm.
things, turn a corner for the worst, the hospital's right there. And so it's not, Flagstaff is we're pretty spoiled. It's, what, 8
Oh, it
miles
doesn't
wide,
take
the
more
whole
than
thing,
five minutes to get anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everywhere's close in this town.
We're like, I have to go to the other side of town. It's going to take me 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I know. I know. So yeah, birthing center is going to be really close to the hospital, and so yeah, that's going to open up, and hopefully right in the nick of time because the whole fiasco that's happening right now. Yeah, North Country is very overwhelmed. I've heard.
I had no idea any of this was going, but my kids are older, so like I
Yeah,
don't really know too many people that are having babies anymore. It's like my cousin's kids, like all of
yeah,
our kids that are it's like that's when you're old. Is when your cousin's kids are all having babies. But
yeah,
I'm like, I
right.
go to more 50th birthday parties at this point in my life, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm a little out of touch with that. It's good to know we're getting the birthing center. The other thing too, again, because I've kind of been like out of this and this baby stuff for a while, but and Flagstaff in general, I mean, like we're kind of a special place in terms of being a little bit more open to doulas and midwives and kind of more natural kind of ways of living and so that makes us pretty unique. But even still, like have you seen are you seeing a change in like even a more broader and bigger group of people becoming more open or even desiring something other than just delivering in a hospital? Has that changed?
Yes. So I wouldn't say that it's been, a straight upward. It's kind of done this. So I feel like there was actually a fairly high demand when I was using woman care. Woman care was owned by another midwife, Marianne, in town, and she retired and sold her business. And there were a lot of home births. So it was actually very, I don't want to use the term popular, but it was very widely accepted and sought after to have a home birth. And then I felt like that kind of went away more so because there wasn't the availability. For a little while, there wasn't, there just weren't the options. And so woman care used to have um, several midwives. I think there were five, maybe more. So they really had a well-oiled machine with their business. And so when there was that transition time frame, I feel like there were a lot less home births. And then again, I'm not great with statistics and remembering, but after COVID, a lot more people were choosing to have home births because of COVID. Nobody wanted to go have a baby with COVID floating around. So
That
there
makes
was,
so much sense.
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Which
So
is
there was
a
an
good thing,
uptick.
right? There's
Yeah.
good things that came out of that.
Hospitals were scary for a while there.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I was lucky. I had mine. I had him at home anyways, but I had my youngest in September of 2019, right before the world,
Mm.
shut down and everything. But yeah, I can only imagine how scary that would be. So there was the uptick in home births then, and then there was more availability. And then again, we had another transition specifically in Flagstaff when we had the birthing center with several different midwives, and then that closed down as well. And so then there was kind of another shift. And yeah, we're definitely seeing it. Actually, I had um, one of the midwives. I had a conversation with her the other day, and she had a client call her and tell her that she was told this client, essentially this is all third hand information, but this client told the midwife that she had been referred to Margie to have a home birth because there was such a crazy demand going on at North Country. They're overwhelmed. And that's really the first time I've been in Flagstaff 21 years this May. I've certainly never heard a conventional OB um, be that supportive and then go the step further to encourage or suggest a home birth because they're that oversaturated right now with clients and kind of trying to figure
Wow.
out how to make that work. So
That's
yeah, definitely
crazy.
seeing an uptick in it for sure.
I mean, could this be a real shift in the whole healthcare scene and that birthing at home kind of becomes actually the way to do it and you only go to the hospital if you need to?
Absolutely. And I think too, it's just about availability. So right now we really only have two midwives, but I know that there are several in training with woman care. And so when they are able, when there's several different midwives in one practice, that really opens up the availability too, because the midwives have to cap it off. They're trying to juggle a personal life and family life with being a midwife. And so, they have to say, I can only take, let's say 2 births a month. And so if there is that third client and they can't do it, that's problematic. So making sure that there is the availability. And I do see that happening, especially with the birthing center and knowing that there are some midwives in training with woman care and different things. And I think the other thing is there's just been this stigma behind it until COVID. And then it gave that reason of like, no, there's an extra, more in-depth reason to why you wouldn't go to a hospital. This is a place you go when you're sick. There's just so many illnesses are in a hospital. And this, a birth and a pregnancy, that's not an illness. And so being able to have a safe space to do that with a professional who is trained medically, then became a more widely accepted option. So for sure, I hope, that this is the direction we're taking. I don't have any personal opinion to what a woman wants for her birth, but I know how wonderful it was for me, and just hoping that other women who also seek that type of experience, that they're able to have that.
Yeah, I like this idea. And I'm thinking, and Jeremy, I don't know if this has popped in your head, but thinking back to our interview with Latham Thomas with Mama Glow, she talked about how there was like this kind of this perception, or not even more than perception, this approach in the industrial age that kind of shifted over many decades, that like the woman's body is like a machine, right? Like we just do these things. And so and we were talking specifically about the increase of C-sections, right? And so in kind of this medical intervention and whatnot. And so that just like the way that we approach delivery of babies changed so drastically that made those C-sections increase. And instead, like we're not, yeah, yeah, our body's like a car, right? Like all these things, sure, but it's not. It's a woman's body. It's very different. None are the same. And I mean, truthfully, I mean, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see this shift. I think it makes sense. It's natural. We're not sick, you know, like to your point. We shouldn't be going to a hospital. You go to a hospital when you're unwell or you have an acute condition that needs, you know, taken care of. Now, if you're a high risk pregnancy or anything like that, absolutely 100%. Like that should probably be your focus, right?
And I think a lot of people, they just feel more comfortable in general. And
Hmm.
I think that's when a doula comes into play. Is there are, folks that are just kind of stepping into this whole world of becoming a parent. And there's a lot to learn in a very short amount of time. And it can be very overwhelming. And pregnancy and birth are just one part of it. You're a parent for a lifetime after that. And so I think the people that are wanting to, have a hospital birth, that's why they hire a doula. And that's why doulas are in more of a demand for hospital births, ironically, because if someone's hiring a midwife, they feel like they're already going to get that level of care with the midwife. And so,
Hmm.
for an example, too, a midwife after birth will come and check on the mama the day after, 2 days after, 4 days after. I don't know their exact schedule, but they will come, nearly every day that first week. And it's a very more intimate relationship with the client that a midwife has versus an OB. And so I think, a doula is more so hired to still try to facilitate that whole experience with the client, that they feel like they're more cared for and nurtured when going to a hospital. And so, like I said, yeah, it's funny, the demand of for a doula is more so at a hospital. But as long as the mom has that choice, and like I mentioned previously, one of my best friends, she had a lovely experience. She went in, she had an epidural, took a nap, they woke her up and told her to push, and everything was great. And so it's really about, it doesn't matter what the mom chooses, it's that the mom feels that she has a choice. I think
Yeah.
is the biggest thing in all of this. And that is a big part of the doula role. And I think too, a lot of times women are very intimidated to go against the norm. So let's say they're going in and they don't want to necessarily offend the doctor or go against what the doctor's saying, but having a doula there to remind them and send that evidence of whatever it is decision that they're trying to make, to give them that confidence to say, no, I really feel strongly. Again, going back to delayed cord clamping, I always use that as a pretty easy example, but saying there might be a provider that's like, well, I really don't recommend that. Guess what? It's still the client's choice. And so clients can feel, I don't want to use the term bullied, but, sort of pressured into making decisions. And so having a doula, again, we have no opinions, but giving them that evidence so that they feel confident in whatever decision they're trying to make is another part of it. And I think that plays a bigger role in a hospital versus a home birth setting, if that
Yeah,
makes
they
sense.
feel empowered to dictate their birth, right? Or the
Mm-hmm.
birth of their child. Yeah.
It's their decision. Yeah.
Hmm.
And even things as simple that a lot of folks don't know. You go to a hospital and they'll hand you a gown and say, go ahead and get dressed, you know, and they're not going to preface it to you at any point and say, you can bring whatever you want. You don't have to wear anything, you know, I mean, women in labor, sometimes they do their own thing and they're all natural. And but the fact that you have that option, and I think a lot of people when they just go in and have a baby at a hospital, they don't know any of this stuff. And so even some of the very seemingly basic decisions, they are decisions. They're not, you have to wear this gown. And so really breaking all of that down for the client so that again, it can be this like experience that they will talk about and remember positively for a lifetime.
That's great.
Yeah, like a real having an advocate throughout the process basically is,
Yep.
always going to help. But, you keep referencing the shift from doula to midwife. Is that a common thing for doulas to move up, I guess, or transition into midwifery? And what is that transition like? Is how much of a process is that?
Well, very, very different processes. A midwife is, I mean, it's going to take a long time, lots of commitment, lots of education, and steps that you have to take to become a midwife because you are essentially, I mean, you're medically trained in every aspect for the mama, the baby, all of it. And with a doula, again, we're not medical. And so the training to become a doula is much more simple. And so, although we are, you know, well educated on what the labor process looks like and we've experienced it a million different ways, you know, for me over the years I don't want to say that I've seen it all because as soon as I say that I'll see something different. I mean, you really do learn something new with each birth, and even which each client is different. And so just because they've had a baby, you know, and you've been the doula for a previous birth, the next one's going to be completely different. And so you know, to become a doula is a much more simple process than becoming a midwife, but the commitment is a lot less. Although I am on call and I am there sometimes, you know, 24 plus hours for a birth is pretty common for it to be 24 hours. A midwife is much more in depth, like I talked about before. They not only the postpartum and how frequent they are checking on the mom after the baby's born, but the level of responsibility that they have, you know, for the client. And really, there is no responsibility on my part. I'm not going to tell them when to go to the hospital. Again, I can say, hey, you know, based on the timing of your contractions and your mannerisms, like you're in a really good labor pattern. I think it's time to do this. Let's, you know, make our way to the car if we're at home. And so the responsibility and the expectations are a lot less. And so therefore, yeah, the training for a midwife is pretty intense. I have looked at it before, but to be able to reiterate that specifically, I don't know that I could be able to, but it's really amazing what they do because it is such a commitment. And the women that become midwives are clearly dedicated to the cause, the purpose, and the women that they're taking care of. I mean, it's definitely a calling for sure.
Are they covered by insurance? Do you know?
So insurance is becoming more widely acceptable for doulas as well.
We've heard a little bit about that too, which is cool, like through or like employers offering it as part of like benefits packages for their employees, or maybe even Medicaid, I think is what
Yeah,
Latham had talked about too.
she said there was a federal program. If you asked for the
Hmm.
right paperwork and filled it out, you could get a free doula,
Yeah,
even
Yeah.
without, like, not even insurance. It's just a federal program.
Yeah.
that's pretty
So it
crazy.
is becoming more widely accepted and understood that having a doula produces positive outcomes for pretty much everybody involved. And so, um, you know,
It's
and we can talk
preventative
more about
care.
that relationship with, you know, the OBs and nurses if you have any questions regarding that, but how that works. And
Yeah.
because we really, for everybody that's involved in the birth process, the doula really does make everything go smoothly,
Hmm.
is the idea behind it.
Do most OBs appreciate you being there? Like, do you have pretty good relationship, or like you feel pretty comfortable and welcome at the bedside?
Absolutely. Specifically with FMC, great relationship with the labor and delivery nurses, which, you know, you really
Hmm.
interact with more so than the OBs, but the
Right.
OBs as well, and getting to know them and being able to sort of give your clients what to expect. You know, again, while you're not giving medical advice, you can say, oh, I know this OB does not like delayed cord clamping. So if that is important to you, you know, you might have to really advocate for that. because this OB does not like to do that, or different things like that. And so, as a doula, we get to know the OBs and sort of what they tend to do and their expectations are in the birth process too for the client and different things, and we can relay that. But yeah, we make everyone's lives, essentially the labor and delivery nurses, lives easier in that process, because they have a lot of roles that they're doing. They're charting, they're doing the medical side, they're doing cervical checks, they're doing blood pressure and all of these things, and talking to the doctor. And they might, on a busy day, they might have so many different rooms full that they're going back and forth, whereas the doula is there, and then if something changes, they can go out and say, hey, listen, this is going on, and kind of a mediator between that without speaking up for the client, but saying like, there was one example is there was a mom that it had been at it for a while and she really needed some sleep. And so, kind of communicating that with a nurse kind of outside of the room of like, what do you guys have a game plan? Let's talk to the OB, and then kind of being there to make sure that all of that goes smoothly so that we can figure out options to help the mom get some rest. And she was able to get rest and have a very successful birth experience. So yeah, my understanding is they really look forward to it when we're at a birth. And we've even had them say, please tell me you're going to this room. And we're like, no, we're going over here. And they're like, oh man, she really needs a doula. So I think we
Mm,
are appreciated, in the hospital as well at those births.
that's good to hear.
Yeah,
I had
we
wondered.
really have to set up firm boundaries though, so that we don't offend an OB. It's not our place to have a medical decision or to say, "Ooh, I think you should do this," or it has nothing to do with us as a doula. This is about the mom and her decision and her partner, and the OB, and whatever's going on medically. So we have to really set firm, strong boundaries. And even if we know on the birth plan that there was something the client was wanting or not wanting, and we see that unfold, we don't say, hey, my client doesn't want that. We'll go, oh, it looks like, again, I keep going back to the delayed cord clamping, just to not get into, there's so many different topics we could get into, but if we see that it's happening, we can say, oh, I see that they're about to do cord clamping. I know that you had mentioned that you wanted to wait until it stops pulsating. Are you comfortable with this moving forward? Or, do you want to talk about that? And so sort of pausing the situation so we can have eyes and ears on the room, and we can be very aware of what the client is wanting, but we'll never speak on their behalf, making sure that we keep those firm boundaries so that we don't offend a midwife, or we don't, get a bad reputation with an OB where we're not welcome. So we really have to be very firm in our boundaries with what we do as a doula.
That's fair. Gotta know your politics and all,
Yeah.
Do you have, as a doula, is there like it's a very, maybe a misplaced term, but a toolkit, a standard, like the doctor's black bag or the contractor's
So reach down
toolkit?
right here. This is my
I
Yeah.
have an actual bag.
I want to know what's in there. What is in that bag? What is a
So
standard
we
doula
have a
toolkit?
lot of different tools. So I always have a heat pack, TENS unit. I always have different types of massage lotions. I have some tools for massage. One in particular that it's a massage gun, and because everybody is different, and then something that might feel great at one moment, as labor progresses and intensifies, might not be great for another. So, for example, with that is some women really love hip squeezes. And so it's just as it sounds, where a doula is squeezing their hips together during the contractions. Personally, if somebody had tried to squeeze my hips, well, we won't go there. I would not have been very nice about it. I personally did not want anybody touching me, but
Be the
at the same
last thing you
time,
ever
I've had
do, buddy.
clients that are like, I cannot squeeze their hips hard enough. And so everybody's just different. And so having a variety of coping mechanisms. We also have a rebozo, which is a traditional Mexican scarf. I was going to see if I can find that.
Rebozo, is that what you said?
A rebozo, yeah. And so there's lots of different tools. Yeah, it is in here. Show you what that looks like.
Oh, okay. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah,
I know
sure.
this word, and
Sure,
now
sure,
I'm
sure.
seeing it. Yep.
Yeah.
What do you do with
So the
that?
Big
rebozo,
long
there's
fancy
lots of different
scarf.
tricks that we can do with that.
Oh,
And I've used it a million different ways. But so
interesting.
that's another tool that we have in the bag. I always have
Okay.
lots of snacks because if, if the cafeteria is closed and there's a long labor, it spans overnight or even going into the second night, I want to make sure that I have nutritious food. And so when I know that I'm on call for a birth, I will sort of keep this stocked and restocked. I'll have, apples, nuts, protein bars, things that are very quick and easy to eat to give me a boost. And so, yeah, in case we're there for a long time, I have my basics like deodorant and a toothbrush as well, just to make
There
sure
you
that
go.
I'm pleasant
Yeah.
to give support. So,
That's important. You actually think about yourself.
Yeah.
There
yeah,
you're there.
I got to
That's
make
good,
sure that,
right?
yeah,
Oh man,
it's a great
what's your
experience for everybody. And yeah.
yeah, what is your favorite thing? Like what is your absolute favorite thing about being a doula?
Huh.
I love how empowered women feel. I know I keep saying that one too. A lot of these things, I'm really reiterating the same things over and over, but it is a big part of it.
That's why
And
you do this work, so makes
it
sense.
is. And the clients, they are so grateful. I've had some clients that and you form a bond with certain people, certain clients, and so there's some that still text me. They will text me baby pictures and just, we were talking about you today, and we just want to thank you again. And it's been, 9 months since their baby was born, and they, and so I put the ladies that helped me through my birth on a pedestal. I'm very grateful for them. I know what they sort of sacrificed in their own personal lives to be there, because my births were all 24 hours, and then they say that it gets shorter with each birth. Well, I call bull on that, because my last birth was still 17 hours
Oh boy.
Wow.
Mm,
for my fourth one. And so, but
Oof.
these women were with me for a significant amount of time, and they're giving up whatever, and they're seeing me, in my most raw, it could be taken as humiliating form as a woman. I mean, you know, you're in the thick of it, and they are
mhm.
just so loving. Usually, women that are in this industry, they're just so empathetic and loving. And so then they in turn have such gratitude. And so I love that I get the gratitude from these clients for being there, but also I think they underestimate their own, you know, their own ability, their own strength. I mean, they're the ones who did it, no matter how the birth unfolded. It takes so much as a woman to be able to bring life into this world. And even when it is a cesarean, you're giving up so much of yourself, in that process to become a mother. And so I love that whole experience. And I've seen women, just really own it, and they can just be the most amazing goddesses, in that moment in time, really getting in tune with themselves. And it's a beautiful thing to get to support that and experience it. So
That's awesome. Well, and it takes a really special person to do what you do too. So
I bet it's never boring.
no.
Definitely never boring.
never boring and no day is the same, right? And all that. So where do you see your journey going with being a doula? How do you see it changing? Like, I mean, you've been doing this for what, 3, 4 years now?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, certified April 2021. And so I plan on continuing some outside certifications, working towards a more encompassing women's health, for me. So currently I'm working on my naturopathy practitioner certification. And so I have a passion for herbal remedies. I don't want garlic if I break my arm. There is a time and a place, for conventional medicine, absolutely. But I personally have seen things on both sides of it. And so I think that if you can try to take an herbal remedy when guided and educated and taken the right way, can really help. And specifically with women's health, there's a lot of women dealing with infertility and postpartum, or those types of different things. And so being able
Perimenopause.
to offer,
I
you
like
know,
I like mentioning that one.
yeah,
We can use those herbal supplements.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
For the right
absolutely.
issues, that's
So
that's a better way to go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, so bringing that to the table so that women, know those options. One good example I like to use too for that is fenugreek is great for breast milk production for a mom that's choosing to nurse. And so I've had clients reach out to me afterwards, like, months afterwards even. And, even though my role as a doula has ended, maybe on a more personal woman to woman, level, like, I do know what I can do. And so fenugreek is a really great one, but having a certification behind that to give it credibility to some of the knowledge that I've gained over the years. Because if you remember, I was the manager for New Frontier Supplements.
I do remember that.
Oh, okay.
Yes. She
Yeah,
knows all sorts of stuff.
yeah. So I went down that rabbit hole, and I experienced firsthand, of what the right supplements can do. And so the brands and all that. So currently I'm getting my naturopathy practitioner, looking to get certified to teach birthing classes. There are, several different options in our town, but there's, the hospital I think is like a one Saturday, kind of a birthing course, and it's a crash course, and it doesn't offer any coping mechanisms. It's very like what to expect. These are the interventions, send you on your
Oh,
way.
mm-hmm.
And so then there are other classes that are like 10 weeks long, and that can be very daunting for some people to be able to do a 10-week class, doing it every Monday night or Wednesday night or whatever. And so, I'm hoping to offer something sort of in between that. That is not necessarily a crash course, but it is a little bit more conducive to the average working family who, you've got two parents that are about to, go into this new journey, and they need to know this information, but yet they don't have the time commitment of, let's say, 10 weeks or something like that. So, and then also on the, horizon is I am getting certified to help with pelvic floor recovery. Um, and so that is something that I found over and over again, that women need help with pelvic floor. A lot of them go see a pelvic floor specialist, and we do have some really great ones in town. And that is more of a specific, like you have to have your nursing degree or something to go in that direction. And so they are very well trained and certified in what they do. But there's women sort of in between that don't necessarily need to go see a specialist, but they do need just a little bit of help after the baby's born to fine tune the pelvic floor. And so, again, trying to encompass all of women's health when, in regards to the pregnancy and birth process and fertility process and postpartum.
Wow, that's cool.
What is the
I was going to say,
pelvic floor?
Jeremy
I was a
learns
little
so
lost
many
there.
things on this show,
Is that just
especially
getting
about
everything?
women.
Is that just getting everything back in the right place after you have a baby, basically? The
Yes.
pelvic floor thing. That's
Yeah.
all I needed.
Have you
Okay.
ever
Yeah.
heard of
I mean, and
Kegel?
it can take its
Okay,
toll.
sure,
I
sure,
mean,
yeah.
it's
Kind of
you're
that
it's
area.
a
Oh,
lot
I
on the
imagine,
body.
yeah.
The organs are shifting and
Hmm.
rearranging. And so, yeah, I think it's, and I've even had friends that have had conversations with me, just about their personal experiences. And, they had a pretty decent pregnancy and birth, but then it was afterwards that was really hard. So, again, making sure the whole experience into motherhood, the transition into motherhood is as smooth and peaceful and as empowering as possible. And so, on the flip side is it is like, okay, they've had their baby. Yes, we're going to do one postpartum visit afterwards as a doula. But I personally feel drawn to continue to support women and encompass more things into, what I do, what the things that I bring to the table and how I care for my clients. So, yeah,
Mm.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for you. Sounds
thank
like you
you.
got some good things in the hopper.
Absolutely.
Keep expanding your services, and clearly we need them here in Flagstaff anyway.
I had no idea we're so lacking on the birthing front in
That,
this town right now.
yeah, yeah,
It's a good thing we got those midwives around.
right.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, um, as we kind of begin to wrap up here, you've shared so much great information. I feel like this has been such a wonderful complement to the conversation that we had with Latham Thomas, with Mama Glow, and then bringing you and Anya to talk about your actual like hands-on experience about becoming a doula, being a doula. Um, if anyone has any questions about anything about a doula, they just need to listen to these three episodes now.
Yeah, pretty
And
much.
then, let's help bring those numbers up so more and more people bring the, get on the doula wagon.
Yeah, and apparently there's going to be more and more demand for them as time goes on for doulas and midwives if this whole OB, lack of obstetricians keeps up. So,
Yeah. And that might be a
I think
Flagstaff
too,
problem, but
and
yeah.
there's
maybe it's the
definitely
wave
this
of the
level,
future.
Yeah.
there's definitely a level of sort of a wise older woman, that I'm bringing to the table. Like, because I have had the experience personally, but I think that I mean, there's always going to be young mamas that are starting families, and they're going to need that support. And it can be whether it's planned or not planned, but they're going into this journey, just having someone that has been through it and has the experience to really hold their hand and say, not only is it going to be okay, but it can actually be a very beautiful experience. It doesn't have to be fearful. It doesn't have to be negative. So it can be something that, we turn around in more of a positive light. And so that's another part is that wise woman that I'm bringing to the table being a little bit older. So
You are
Yeah.
wise in your
I
years.
mean, who better than someone who's been through it to get
Right.
you through it? You can say that
Exactly.
for just about any situation in
This is
life.
true. Yes. Yeah. Wisdom is always a good thing.
Experience matters, man.
Yeah.
It counts for more. Like you can read all the books you want, and that can be very helpful, but until you experience something, you don't really understand it.
Right.
So there
Absolutely.
Exactly.
you go.
Well, awesome. Well, Anya, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation. I know I've learned even more. I thought I knew quite a bit about doulas, and I've definitely we always walk away from these conversations with people just being more educated and aware of all the good things that are happening out there in the world of healthcare, especially women's health, because we lean very heavily into that lane here. So, anyhow, thanks so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation and digging into the world of a doula. So appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thanks for having me, Heather, and nice to meet you, Jeremy. It was really
Yeah,
great.
you
Yeah.
too. Thanks for coming.
Awesome. 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 Awesome.
And there you go. Our conversation with Anya the doula. That was pretty cool. I liked getting down into the nitty gritty and the details of it. And I think my favorite part was that she had her doula toolkit literally sitting right next to her when I asked her the question about what was in it. That was cool. But
And we
out,
didn't
out,
prep her for that either.
no, she had no idea that was coming, and it was sitting right next to her. That was so funny. But that was my favorite part. But what are our main takeaways from that, Heather?
I think it what it comes down to is, get a doula, right? Like if you're having a baby, they're really an important part of a women's care team. They shouldn't be undervalued. And it does seem that in most cases, that OBs who are delivering in hospital settings or, or birthing facilities, really do appreciate them, which is great. But they definitely play a big role in uh, delivering healthier babies, creating just generally, better outcomes for moms too. I think, like supporting them in that postpartum period as well. So, and, I mentioned, that, and I think we talked about this in the interview with Latham Thomas too, where I said, there's been this shift in healthcare around value-based care being like, take care of things before they get worse, right? Like it's really preventative care so that you start lowering the cost of care, you deliver better care, more quality care. And I think a doula is a really big part of that in the maternal space. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it's been recognized like that, but I think it should be.
Well, I think most people are unaware of doulas at
Hmm.
this point, to be honest with you. But the more they're putting themselves out there, and people like us help them put themselves out there, the more people will know about it. And the fact that there's a federal program that if you fill out the right paperwork, you can get free doula services.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
like we talked about that pretty in depth with Latham back in
Hmm.
episodes 10 and 11. I think I mentioned it in passing here, but it's worth saying again. Like, if you're a pregnant woman, you want a doula, ask for that paperwork because
Hmm.
apparently you can get free doula services.
Yeah, and I think, another point too, outside of certain circles, and I'd say you're kind of, doulas are like such a hippie thing, right? Which is why I think it's kind of normal here in Flagstaff and probably other areas like, you'd think like a Boulder, Colorado, or, places like that. Um, but doulas are for everybody. They aren't just for hippies.
And especially now, and especially in places like this, we're down to one OB for the entire town of Flagstaff. If you
Right.
count the college, there's almost 100,000 people in residence relying on that hospital. And it's the only hospital in northern Arizona, which means Navajo Nation, all the tourists to the Grand Canyon and all the other parks around here.
Hmm.
If you're north of Phoenix in Arizona and something goes wrong, you're going to Flagstaff Medical Center. And if you're a pregnant woman
Hmm.
in that area, that's the only real hospital you have. And there is one doctor there to deliver babies.
Yeah.
It is a very good thing we have these midwives and doulas and all these people in Flagstaff existing
Hmm.
because they're going to have to take the brunt of this now. Like they're going to be the ones that everybody's going to now.
Yeah.
And the fact that it is more accessible for women to become that, to become these things than it is to become an actual full on medical doctor. And at the same time, they seem to get better results in the birthing process than the full on medical doctors.
Which is one of the biggest things, right? Like when we talk about healthcare, why are healthcare costs rising so much? And a
Yeah.
lot of it comes down to the way that people access care, right? Like they wait until things get really bad or they don't take advantage of preventative care. They go to the ER because they don't have a PCP. I mean, if we can lower the chances of somebody having a C-section or medical interventions through the relatively low cost of a doula or free, then you're saving money in the long run. Imagine that happening in like volume.
Yeah.
So,
Imagine if that was the way that it's no longer just a weird hippie thing, but it becomes the mainstream. Because if we made it the mainstream, then everybody would do it and
right.
nobody would think it was weird because everybody's doing it. Like
Yeah.
that's just how culture works. The culture needs to change
Yeah.
around all the whole process of birthing in this country.
Normalize doulas.
Yeah. One question that came to mind afterwards that I didn't get to ask is I wonder if there are any male doulas.
I mean, probably, but I gotta
It's
imagine
got
that
to be
number is pretty
rare.
low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like how many women would even be comfortable with that?
True.
But there's got
Yeah.
to be guys out there who would have an interest.
I
It,
mean, there's male OBs. My
yeah,
the
exactly.
doctor who
Exactly.
delivered my second son was a male, and I loved him. He was, oh my God, everybody loved him. So, but doula's a little bit different. That's like more emotional.
More intimate in a way.
Yeah, and not all, sorry, but like
And just personal
men just
relationships.
aren't generally like geared towards
Yeah.
that. But there's a lot of dudes I've met that are
But again,
capable.
if they actually want to get into it for the right reasons,
Yeah,
and they have, especially if they have some sort of, beginning medical background or something, that's the
yeah,
way they want to go with it. Do we want to limit that?
yeah. No, I mean,
They might have a harder time finding clients,
mhm.
but if they're the only choice, it's better than nothing.
Right? Yeah,
And some people might want it.
yeah,
If it's the right guy, or like if they have friends who are having babies and they know this process and they can go in and advocate with the doctor for them and stuff.
yeah,
Maybe with if they want to go to the hospital and have their baby with a male doctor in the hospital, maybe they want a male doula to come in with them to talk to that guy because maybe he'll, show him a better respect. Not that that's the way it should be, but maybe that's the way it is sometimes.
we're creating new career pathways here on the Uprising.
I'm just, equality in all things,
I
man.
love it.
Equality in all
I'm
things.
all for it. Let's go.
Mhm. I don't know. Are we off the rails? What are we talking about?
We're off the rails.
So if you like what you heard right there, and I'm not even sure what it was, but if you liked it, hit those happy little fun buttons, whatever platform you're on, your likes and subscribes. Maybe share us with a friend. If you want to full on join the uprising, we got a Patreon at patreon.com/healthcare uprising. You can join for as little as $1 a month. It goes up from there. That's every dollar helps us keep this train rolling, as it were. I don't know. Where else do they find us, Heather?
You can find us online at healthcareuprising.com and also on all the social platforms like Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Just search Healthcare Uprising Podcast and you'll find us. Also, we would love to have you on our show if you're a founder or somehow associated with a new up and coming healthcare innovative type of company and you've got a great story and you've got a great product or a program or you're doing something really amazing. Love to bring you on the show and bring that education and awareness to the people. And if you're just a human with a regular old healthcare journey story that's good, bad, ugly, or otherwise, we'd love to have you on too. Our human stories are a really important part of the show. Um, Shoot us an email at healthcareuprising@gmail.com if you have a story and want to share it. We'd love to bring you on. And with that, I would say this is your dose of healthcare innovation for today. So keep looking for the good in the world. Sometimes it's where you least expect it.